Hello, everyone. This is War Doctor, and I'm here with a somewhat belated debrief of Operation WarGames. Now, what I want to do in a few minutes is just go over a handful of what I think were some of the more relevant events that happened in the game for the United States Global Command, and in particular, just talk through some of our strategies. Um, some of which that might be a little new, um, but that I think might be vital for any future U.S. Global Command player, especially if you're playing Scenario 2, which is the full European map, or Scenario 3, which involves all 7 players. So the game begins with a handful of live insurgencies. Now, 2 of them are insurgencies against the Soviets. One is in Afghanistan, and the other is down here in, let me get that right, Nicaragua. You can see that Soviet defense treaty marker. Now, in our game, Afghanistan went Soviet, but the People's Revolutionary Front, which is usually a major early game way in which the Soviet Global Command gets to spread chaos for the US player in Central America, just didn't form. I shut Flak 88 out of both of these territories. He lost his counterinsurgency role in Nicaragua, and I won my very improbable counterinsurgency role in El Salvador. So both of those territories turned US, freeing up some light infantry, which I was able to deploy to hotspots around the world, like South Africa. I sent a spare one up to Iceland. And I think I may have sent the third to Diego Garcia at some point later in the game. So that was one key thing, which was just pure luck. But sometimes luck gives you kind of interesting results. And in this game, the absence of PRF allowed Flak 88 to focus his efforts in a lot of other places. He flooded huge amounts of support to both of his allied partners. I haven't rolled the full map out, but Captain G got an enormous number of units for use in China, and a fairly significant force deployed out of Western Ukraine into the theater. And Flak 88 also sent significant forces up through the Nordic countries via Finland and Sweden, whom he declared war on relatively early in the game. Now, something we anticipated and planned for, assuming there was not a full flowering of the People's Revolutionary Front, which, if it gets all of its potential sort of possible results, the Soviets don't get an event. But on turn 2, we did roll an event, and what ended up happening was the India-Pakistan War. And in that event, what we had planned to do was, well, sorry for the Pakistanis, but more or less abandon giving them military aid in the form of land units, and instead give them naval units. Now, why would we do that, you might ask? Well, this. So one of the great liabilities of the U.S. Global Command in this game is that while they start with a pretty nice Indian fleet based around Diego Garcia, they have no way to reinforce those units except the hard way, sending them entirely around the globe, except through military aid. Now, if you know a nation is going to align to you, like Pakistan did at the end of this event, and we knew those units were going to become ours, we could simply gift them a cruiser and a pair of frigates, which make for maximum additional missile defense. So I was able, through this Indian fleet, and something else I'll talk about in a bit, able to continually reinforce and defend those precious oil tankers, because each one of those that is hit reduces either U.S. Global Command or NATO IPP by 2 per turn. So it's absolutely vital you keep that oil flowing. There are several other oil markers around the map which have a similar effect. We're able to protect those reasonably well, I think. So I think the third major thing which mattered throughout the game, which I've kind of represented here with this fleet, the U.S. starts with a fleet on the East Coast. and we moved it straight up here as soon as we were legally able to in the game. And this was important because sea control in general in this game is an underappreciated thing. If you can bottle up the Soviet fleet and keep it from taking to the seas, you do a lot to protect your sea lift and the unimpeded flow of assets into Europe. Now, for all sorts of reasons created by Brother Flak 88, I was not able to get a whole lot of land units over to Europe. There was so much pressure put on NATO that my immediate goal was to give them air units and anything that could get there immediately in the form of military aid and just straight airlift. So I sea lifted one major military column over, but after that switched almost entirely to air power. That said, though, the additional money I spent on naval forces throughout the map really did aid us in keeping the Soviets contained and unable to inflict tremendous damage everywhere. There was no point of the game where our oil was sort of thoroughly out of our control. We were able to strike Soviet submarines and force them into silent running repeatedly over the course of the game. And so it was really a pretty awesome setup. So one thing I can't recommend highly enough to anyone playing either side of the board is the United States is invest in naval power. It may seem like less fun, like something you can't immediately use, and often it isn't, but it's definitely a tremendous asset in how you can control your enemy's movements, impose threats on him in various places, as I'll talk about in a sec, and allow you to exploit opportunities. And I did that twice in this game. So as part of the fleet at Diego Garcia is an amphibious assault ship. You don't have any Marines there at the beginning of the game, but you do have them as deployable expeditionary forces. And so that's where I sent one of my Marines. I also air deployed, I think, a second one over. And so as soon as I was able, legally in the rules to do so, when I hit DEFCON 3, which allows you to declare war on one minor faction per turn, I declared war on little old South Yemen. Now again, this didn't really obviously get me anything. You don't see any IPP there. The US gets no bonus income from that. But it is a Soviet ally, A, which means I can attack them. And B, it's a place you can drop a minor shipyard. And I did that as quickly as I could possibly do it. Had I secured advanced manufacturing earlier in the game, I would have been able to do it in one turn, which would have been awesome, but instead I had to do it over two. And for the rest of the game thereafter, almost every turn I deployed at least one frigate, usually two here, and reinforced them, because Flak 88 used his air bases in India and later in Tehran when he took it to send the dreaded backfires down here, sending wave after wave of missile strikes down upon this fleet, which was reasonably well stocked for the entire game, but there was hardly a turn where I didn't lose at least one frigate. So this would have been catastrophic if I had not built up this power here. So the last thing that I think could have been decisive if the game gone on, which took a while to get spun up, was the second minor faction I declared war on was Algeria. Now, Algeria doesn't have a lot going for it in the game. It starts with one light infantry. The Soviets have no way really to activate it. But what it is close to southern Europe. And so when I finally had an opportunity to do so, I took a amphibious force and landed it there. Now, that got me one IPP right away, but it also got me the opportunity to place a minor army base. At the same time, I placed a second minor port, which meant I could sea lift 2 units out of there every turn. And that's exactly what I did. I built US main battle tanks and streamed them up into southern Europe for the last couple turns of the game. And I don't know that they were decisive, but they definitely deterred Soviet aggression and slowed down Soviet aggression in beyond Veneto and and kept them away from Piedmont and Lazio. So there are other strategies. I mean, this is another one of these things where had I gotten the advanced manufacturing technology earlier, I may have been able to build that base faster, um, and gotten more units there. I may have built a major port there and built a second minor army base and streamed more units still into Southern Europe. But it was a really easy way to avoid the Soviet submarine since we had control of the Mediterranean from a fairly early point of the game. And it definitely put pressure on the enemy. So I guess the lesson here, at least for me, is, as the United States, you've got this incredible power to deploy forces, not everywhere you choose, but at least in a few key points, you can inflict surprise on the enemy uh, and sort of take advantage of his weaknesses. In this case, the Soviet weakness was a lack of sea control, um, and we, the NATO alliance, were able to, I think, use our assets as well as possible to eventually roll back the control of Germany from the Warsaw Pact by the end of turn 12, um, and edge them out of second place. So anyway, those are my general thoughts about the game. I think U.S. Global Command is a really hard faction to play. I definitely felt stretched and challenged by the role and by the chaos that Flak 88 and Ozark inflicted on the NATO alliance. And yeah, but it was a great fun game, and I hope we will be able to do some YouTube playtests and other scenarios soon. So anyway, stay tuned to everyone else's channels. Mine's going to be quiet for a little while. I've got some work travel. One thing I'd like to mention, and I'll leave a link below once I get this uploaded, is Historical Board Gaming is running a pre-order sale where you can get complete sets, minimal sets of everything needed to play the game for each of the major factions and the minor factions. And these are at a very steep discount. So especially if you're just starting out, you might look into purchasing these along with the game if you intend to pre-order it. It will make the sort of startup costs of this quite a bit less. So check it out. And if you haven't watched the other ones, many of my colleagues in the game have posted a bunch of other content from Operation WarGames. So anyway, talk to you all later. Bye.